Okay, we'll now move on to the next application on the agenda this evening, which is DED 3/16, 611 to 621 Sydney Road, Brunswick Planning Permit Application, MPS 2014 1103.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, staff.
Please.
Thank you. Tonight, the Urban Planning Committee is considering amended plans for 611 Sydney Road, Brunswick. The proposed description of the amended plans is partial demolition of the existing building, development of the land for Part 9 and Part 7-storey building, including 3 levels of basement and the reduction in the standard car parking. The original application was considered at the last Urban Planning Committee in December, where it was resolved to refuse the application for an 8-storey building. The key issues were non-compliance with the design and the development overlay, loss of heritage fabric, off-site and on-site amenity impacts, and design detail of the proposed development. In terms of the zoning, the site is located within the Commercial 1 zone. It's affected by the heritage overlay and is within the design and development overlay 18, which suggests a maximum overall height of 19 metres and a 5-metre minimum setback from the street wall. I've got a couple of photos up here on the slide which just show the subject site. This is the front of the Courthouse Hotel, which is the existing heritage building. And these photos are just looking to the rear of the site. I've got a summary of changes up on the board, however that list is quite extensive. So what I might do is just quickly summarise those key concerns or the key changes based on the key concerns from the Urban Planning Committee in December. So the main change includes retention of the existing Courthouse Hotel. So this includes the facade and the internal floor layout. The restoration of the ground floor heritage facade, reduction in the number of dwellings, reduced overall height, revised architectural detail to Sydney Road Tower, increased setback from the rear, and reconfiguration of the basement. And I'll just highlight some of these changes in the plans. So the images that I have on the board include the advertised plan that was refused in December and an image of the proposed redesigned development. In terms of the changes, we can see from the cross sections here where the reduction of the height occurs. So this is the front section where instead of having an 8-storey building, there's a 7-storey building. And in terms of the rear, due to the changes to the basement being offset from under the heritage building, the entire rear section of the building has been reduced in height, and there's a greater setback on the last 3 levels. This is a typical car parking layout, which shows that the car parking and the basement has been removed from under the heritage building, which was a concern in the previous decision. This is the revised ground floor. The main change here includes the reduction in the tavern space, introduction of 2 dwellings facing the lane at the rear, and introduction of a new fitness centre for the use by the future tenants. Just some minor alterations to the first floor, but essentially the same, just contains dwellings, and then this layout is just repeated for the floors above. The main change in terms of the configuration of the last level includes provision of a loft-style apartments to the rear because of the reduction in the 8th level across the front. The lift core ends at the 7th level, so you go across, and these apartments are double-storey. The elevations obviously now show the changes to the detail and the architectural form of the building, including the ground floor facade, heritage facade, and the introduction of different architectural features to the upper level to Sydney Road. Again, just some elevations showing the layout or the setbacks of the proposed new building and the overshadow diagrams. So we are recommending that the submission to VCAT be one of support for the revised plans, and I just wish to make a correction to condition 1G and include the words that are here in red to read: the car parking spaces bounded on one side by a wall must be at least 2.9 metres wide.
Thank you. Are there any members of the gallery who wish to object to this application and speak this evening? No? No speak? Yes?
Of course there is. But
Please. Of course.
here we go again. Well, I'm saying the same thing again.
Yes.
I'm objected to, I'm for progress, not regress. I'm happy they're building that actually, but only 5 to 6 story. The reason why, we got a lot of problem with the parking at the moment. We got the building is gonna be that building is gonna be block the sun to about 3/4 of our building. It will block the sun. About 3/4 of it. What else? Interest on the view. Of course, we're gonna lose money. We're gonna lose about $100,000 in an apartment because we buy that for the view. I know it's not interest for you. It's different. It's a different opinion of you. Maybe they told me the view it's not interest, but we are losing money because we buy that for beautiful view, and now it's gonna be blocked. But it doesn't matter. But it's something to think about also because we are losing money. Traffic, also the music. It's a lot of. It's gonna be a lot of. We have a problem already with the music to 3 o'clock in the morning. So you imagine you put this building, it's gonna be more young people to go to the place, near us and make more noise. Anyway, that's another thing to think about because it's gonna be more people.
What level are you on? What level are you on in the room?
I'm on the top floor.
How high is that?
9. The other.
Do you wish to?
It was another.
There was another point.
thing, but I forget now.
You may have very well covered it in the last.
Oh yeah. It's because it's an old building. Okay, it will look not bad if you put it behind the extension of the building, but I don't think it will look nice if it's too high. Not because any view or anything like that, but it will look funny to have a nice building and in the back have a tall one. It just doesn't look very nice, as you've seen. If it would be shorter, it would look better. It looks like you put another building behind the Colosseum or something. I don't know. As I say, I'm happy if it will be 6-story. I'll be happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any further objectors who wish to speak? No? Is there a representative for the applicant present? Yes, please come forward.
Thanks, Councillor. Simon Martin here again from Ratio Consultants. I was here back in December. Following on from December's UPC meeting, amended plans have been formally substituted through VCAT following an agreement made between planning officers and the permit applicant at the VCAT mediation of the 18th of December. As noted by Diana, significant changes have been made to the application, which was considered before you at December's UPC. These can be summarised as including full retention of both internally and externally of the heritage building, being the Courthouse Hotel. This will result in significant heritage benefits to the local area. A reduction in the height of the front building from 8 to 7 stories, with revised setbacks of the upper level to ensure that only a 6-storey building is presented to Sydney Road as viewed from the opposite side of the street. A 10-metre front setback of the front building above the 2-storey heritage facade, which is double the amount specified under the proposed DDO 18. Increased rear building setbacks, a reduction in apartment numbers and intensity of the development, and a revision of the development's ground level to improve the pub layout and also provide additional amenities to residential apartments, including a gymnasium. We consider the significant community benefits in the retention and retaining of the heritage building, despite Council's Heritage Advisor previously stating that they had no objection to the proposed demolition that was put forward under the original scheme, far outweighs the disbenefits in allowing a height above the 19 metres, which is an arbitrary figure proposed by the yet-to-be-approved DDO. We consider the additional height is appropriate because the front building will present as a 6-storey building with a height of 18.1 metres to Sydney Road due to the significant setbacks of the upper level, which is below the 19 metres specified under DDO 18. The rear building, whilst greater than 19 metres, will be screened by the 7-storey approved development number 26 BREESE Street and the 9-storey building at 601 Sydney Road to the south. This will ensure that there will be limited visibility of the building from the public realm. Additional height above the 19 metres will also have no shadow impacts on the Anstey Square and walkway to the south of the site, as opposed to a DDO 18 compliant development at 19 storeys. The bulk of shadow cast over this space will actually be caused by the development approved at number 26 BREESE Street to the rear, which is approved by Council hard edge up to 7 storeys along the rear boundary. In addition to Council's planning officers in support of the application, I note all internal referral departments also support the revised scheme. Significantly, the amended plans were advertised to 250 plus people, with only 2 persons lodging statement of grounds with VCAT. This is also a significant reduction from the 14 people who objected to it originally. We've reviewed the officer's recommendation and report and fully support both. We would say that this is a byproduct of the work that's been put in between the Council's planning department and our representatives over a 14+ month period. As such, we respectfully request the Council's vote in support of the application and keep in mind that the benefits it will cause as a result of this application through the retention of the heritage building as presented to Sydney Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Are there any questions from councillors to the applicant or officers? No? No? Is there a motion a councillor wishes to move? Councillor
I'm happy to
Kavanagh?
move the officer recommendation on page 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 72. So from 68 to 72, and
Thank
if I have
you,
a
Councillor.
seconder, I'll speak to it.
Is there a seconder?
I would second that.
Councillor Thompson?
I don't normally vote in favour of an application that exceeds our structure plan height, but you might remember at the last meeting I did commit that if you came back with other plans I'd look and give my view, and I do think this is a much improved application. Yes, it does in some parts exceed the structure plan height, so I can understand that that's a concern for some people. But I do think that the saving of the courthouse building in its entirety is a very important consideration. I do think that you've been very careful in your setbacks, etc., and I think that's got to be acknowledged. Would have liked to see it in the first application, but still it's there now, so that's how it is. And so, I think there's looking at the list that Diana put up before and having considered those over since I've received the agenda in a week, I think, they are major considerations and major improvements, and as such, it will receive my support.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Thompson, do you wish to speak? No?
Look, just to say that I very, very, very rarely support anything that goes over the structure plan height, and I'm one of the biggest advocates for mandatory height controls. For that reason, I think that our residents have every right to deserve stability in the heights that they expect in their neighbourhood. And I'm disappointed that this goes above the height that we would like to see in this area and that we continue to see that occurring. Having said that, I find it very difficult to vote against this in light of the fact that there is a 9-storey building so immediately abutting it. I think that the precedent that already exists in this area means that in this case, given the setbacks and given the fact that there is a 9-storey building, and in fact you, sir, live on the 9th storey, so we know that that is there, so close to it, it doesn't make it completely okay. It doesn't make the first 9-storey building okay. If we hadn't approved the first 9-storey building, or VCAT hadn't approved it, then I'd be voting in a very different way. But because it is there, and this is it's a much better outcome than previous applications in this case, and does preserve the historical integrity of the Courthouse Hotel, I'm going to end up coming down in support of this, but I don't want anyone sitting at home to think that that means that I'm encouraging you to go above the height limits, because I will 99.9% of the time vote against you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopper. I'll put Councillor Kavanagh's motion to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. And I'll now pass to the officer to sum out the process from here.
Thank you. The Urban Planning Committee has resolved to advise the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal that Council supports the application subject to the conditions within the recommendation, noting that VCAT will be making the final decision on this application. The matter is scheduled for VCAT in March. I'm not quite sure of the date now, but I can confirm that for the objectors.
Thank you very much, mate.
The objectors who have lodged a statement of ground with VCAT will have the opportunity to address Tribunal directly at the hearing.
Thank you very much. We need that out there. No. Okay. We'll now move on to DED 4/1623 Blythe Street, Brunswick, planning permit application MPS 2015-289. And when the officer's ready, I'll pass over to outline the application. Thank you. Thank you.
This application proposes demolition of an existing dwelling and construction of 3 new dwellings in a neighbourhood residential zone and a heritage overlay. The site's located on the north side of Blythe Street, approximately 180 metres east of Sydney Road. And while it's in a heritage overlay, this is the subject site here, it's graded non-contributory. The advertised plans are contained at page 123 of tonight's agenda. The proposal constitutes the demolition of the existing building on the site and its replacement with 2 side-by-side double-storey 2-bedroom dwellings facing Blythe Street and a single-storey 3-bedroom dwelling behind with pedestrian access from the street. Vehicle access and parking will be provided from a laneway to the rear of the site. The proposal is generally compliant with Res Code. It provides parking in accordance with Clause 5206 requirements, and it's supported by Council's Heritage Advisor and Development Assessment Engineers, subject to some minor changes included in the recommendation. The application was advertised and 2 objections were received. Key concerns raised include neighbourhood character, overdevelopment, car parking and traffic in the laneway, and amenity impacts to adjoining dwellings. In particular, concerns were raised about daylight impacts to an existing light court to the north at 25 Blythe Street, and after consultation with the objector, conditions were devised to increase the setbacks of dwelling 2 from this light court at ground and first floor level and achieve full compliance with the relevant Res Code standards, and these conditions are included in the recommendation. It's recommended that a notice of decision issue subject to the conditions outlined in the report.
Thank you. Are there any members of the gallery who wish to speak in objection to this application? Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Deborah Platanis. I live at 45 Shower Street, Preston, but I'm representing my parents, Nick and Miranda Platanis, at 25 Blythe Street, Brunswick. 25 Blythe Street, Brunswick. Could you do me a favour and put onto that image with the front facing, please? The other one before, please, the streetscape. Diagrammatic image, the other one. Yep, thank you. If you could leave it there. My parents understand and don't oppose a reasonable and considered development. We appreciate the visit on site by the Chief Planning Officer and the small changes made to the plans. So we wanted to say that. Our requests for updated shadowing plans were not received, though, unless they were in the final report. Our concerns with the building at 23 Blythe Street, Brunswick, are as follows and remain as we put in the report. The distance between 25 Blythe Street, Brunswick and 23 remains approximately 15 centimetres from the boundary. As you can see from the picture, it is far too close to the existing boundary. This will make maintenance very, very difficult for an old building. I know the report says furthermore aligning walls on boundary with existing walls on boundary is considered to be an efficient and responsive site design, but if you ask my father, his result is we were closed in. If I use the analogy of molars, you still need to floss and get to them in order to maintain them, otherwise they are destroyed. It is an old building. Access will be limited. What we proposed and we asked for is we walked down from Sydney Road to Nicholson Street, all along Blythe Street, and all the properties that are freestanding or semi-attached have a respectful distance between them of at least 1/2 metre to 70 metres. This would make it a precedent and the only property on the street with such a small distance. We request that the respectful distance be applied to 25 Blythe Street, Brunswick, and we repeat what we repeated in our objection, that it remains the current distance to retain the character of the property, the majesty of the property. It is very sad to see something like that. As a resident of Brunswick for a long time, I've seen the Padua Cinema go, I've seen Waddingham's go, and I've seen the Empire go. I don't want things like that to start encroaching and see the historic aspect of the street, the character destroyed. Our second concern is the laneway. While the report says it meets all the measures, I would ask the councillors if they've been to the lane on Edmund Street. It has a very small entry and then it becomes slightly wide. It is a one-way street. 4 cars additional to that would increase the traffic flow on a one-way street. I don't know if your parking officers have recently gone there, but people park right next to the lane, which makes visibility and access a concern. It is high pedestrian traffic lane, it is a pedestrian street, and so our concern is lack of light for visibility. When asked by the council many years ago, my mother asked, can you replace the light? Not our problem. Visibility is a concern, it's an uneven surface. It is dangerous. We would like some sort of consideration made when they look at it, a recommendation as an amendment to look at the safety of the street as well. Our third concern is, and I know it's not directly to the building itself, but the impact of the building during the building process will have close proximity to the residents of my parents' house. It's a bluestone foundation with such close proximity to building. How does one satisfy or safeguard the property itself from any damage and who is responsible? So we would like those 2 concerns included into the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers from the gallery? Yes, please come forward.
My name's Nicholas. I represent my mother who lives at 21 Blythe Street, which is to the left of the proposed development. It's already been raised, but I just want to impress upon council members the narrowness of the lane. It's very difficult to navigate and park to the rear of the lane, and it's impossible to have 4, just by looking at it, I'm not sure if the engineers actually had a look of providing 4 bays as for the proposed parking at the rear. Now, the development also talks about a couple of, apartment-style structures. For about 36 years, my mother, who is retired and lives in the backyard, all her activities are gardening, etc. It's true that the front of the property there's 2 towers, but at the back there's single dwellings. There seems to be no aesthetic reason to cater for, you know, the historic side of Bligh Street. To the north facing of Bligh Street, it's always been a residential area. At the moment, before demolition, there's a clinic. It's a physiotherapy clinic. And patrons move to the front of the property, park, and then they go. So it's a transition of moving cars. But at the back, for a resident with 4 bays, I fail to see how you could park it. You probably need to be, you know, a Grand Prix driver to get it in there. So our concerns is, please revisit the parking bays, because I don't think it's possible to park there. Also, when I visit my mother and my brother who stays and cares for my mother, it's been impossible at the moment to find parking in front of Bligh Street. So can you imagine 10 to 15 people living in that establishment, where are they going to park the cars? So it hasn't been addressed. And the aesthetics of, again, I repeat, the aesthetics will detriment Bligh Street, because in that block, there's no there's no apartments, it's all residential homes. I'm in favour of redevelopment, and my solution is a smaller design, not multiple apartments. We don't want high congestions, overcrowding, as we've witnessed at the Docklands and elsewhere, where 40% of people living in Brunswick.
Sorry, just for the purpose of the audience at home, you may need to take a step back from the microphone, yes.
Talking to real estate agents, 40% of residents in Brunswick are renters. Okay, so we don't want to see beautiful Brunswick become an overcrowded, high congested, high density living in Bligh Street's one of the beautiful parts of Brunswick. We don't want to see that detrimented. And I feel that this multi-level apartment style is a detriment. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers who wish to object to this application? No? Is there a representative for the applicant present? Yes.
Good evening. I'm Paul Connolly from Terrain Consulting. I'm just wondering, is there a copy of the site context plan available for the board before I begin speaking? Because in terms of what is proposed, seems to be at odds with what was described. There's actually 3-storey flats across the road from this site, which are clearly shown on the context plan. What we're proposing is two double-storey dwellings at the front and 1 single-storey dwelling at the rear. It's quite a modest proposal. One of the things that also need the context plan to convey is that the adjoining land to the east, numbers 25 and 27 Bligh Street, is sited in a way that's a boundary-to-boundary style of construction across the width of both frontages. What this proposal seeks to do is build to one boundary against a simultaneously constructed boundary wall and have a side setback on the other side. Now, one of the main considerations in this application is the heritage considerations. There is this particular diagram with the facade. You'll see that it's been designed in a way that the facade has a parapet which is at a similar height to the adjacent dwelling to the east. That's something that the council's heritage advisor picked up on as a positive aspect to the proposal. Council's heritage advisor is supportive of this proposal, has 2 small conditions which have been put on the recommended notice of decision, which relate to changing the window proportions and changing the gate to be transparent. As I say, it's a relatively tame application with 1 single storey at the back, so there's very minimal amenity impacts on rear yards. In terms of one of the main issues, which is the daylight to habitable room windows to the east, that issue has been resolved via conditions which have been applied to the recommended notice of decision, and those were agreed to by the permit applicant an on-site meeting in the objector's property. The issues regarding the access from the laneway, look, this council is particularly, big on promoting access from laneways. This is there's obviously been planning policies which promote this. This is exactly what we're doing. What this means that there's no driveways in the facade. There's no garages in the facade. That would have been detrimental to the facade. That would have taken car parking off the street. These are the reasons why we're directed to put parking at the rear, and the council's traffic engineer has no issues with the proposal. I think I've briefly responded to all the issues raised.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any questions from councillors?
Do we have shadow diagrams? And this is at the Equinox?
Yep,
And at 3 p.m. or 9 a.m.?
that's 9, 12, 3.
Would you mind just doing that one more time, please?
Can I just ask, this is number 21 here.
Yes.
Do we know what living, what quarters that part of the building is? We know if they're habitable.
There's one habitable room window
Right, yeah.
shown on the plans there.
Yeah.
It's 2 stories.
It's only 2 stories, so even if there's only one, it's in height, isn't it?
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Are there any further questions? Is there a motion from a councillor in relation to this application that we wish to put forward? Or do we have some more questions about the application itself?
I'm happy to move the motion if I have a second roll.
Councillor Thompson?
Can I move the motion as presented on page... Sorry. 110. If I have a second, I'll speak to it.
Okay. Okay.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Thompson?
Look, to be honest, you really should thank your daughter for speaking, because you did raise some considerable points there. So I commend you on that and coming forward. It's one of those difficult ones. I look at this and I go, this is not overdevelopment of this site by any means. It's 3 relatively small units, with the one at the rear being only 1 story. And whilst I understand that you live next door to them, this is in a Brunswick, and much more could be done here that would horrify you even further. So we looked at this, and the only 2 people affected, or the only 2 people that have put forward a concern of the 2 residents on either side, which you would expect with a development of this nature. I apologise that there's a words without much substance as far as you're concerned, because it has most of an impact on yourselves. But other developers could come here and whack up 3 or 4 stories. This is in an activities or a residential zone where that could happen. This is not overabundance. I note from the rear and the access to the rear and your concerns with the traffic in there. I can see where you're coming from. I also see that they've set back the car parking so you can swing the cars in and around there to get those 4 in place. But again, that is the parking they've presented on there. And yes, we have had engineers look at that to make sure it can be done. And on paper and on the computer modelling, it can be. Will it be done? We'll wait and see. Look, I commend ArcSign and the team there for giving us a very modest representation in this particular zone. Look, I'm swinging both ways, as you can hear. I'm looking at this and going, it's fine the way it is, but I understand the pain and concern that it sort of gives to the resident side and your parents' respect.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Kavanagh?
Once again, I'm very similar to Councillor Thompson on this particular issue. I do think both objectors spoke very well about their concerns, but I do look at Blythe Street in East Brunswick, and believe me, compared to what could be put onto that site and could possibly gain approval, this is reasonably modest. I know it's that won't resonate with you, but compared to what is possible. And I do have to say that, I'm sure that the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, this would be, I'd be pretty confident this would receive approval pretty easily. I think, and I do think if there was a double story, if that other one was a double story at the back, I'd be far more concerned. But that one being a single story is all that explains me, to be honest.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Hopper?
Thank you. I agree that I don't have any concerns in relation to the height or potential overdevelopment of this site. I think that, we can see from the diagrams that have been presented that there are other properties immediately near this property that have similar heights. I did live on Blythe Street, so for those who sort of often say you may not have had the experience of living on this street, I did live on Blythe Street for 3.5 years at number 107, which is an old manse adjacent to an old church which has been converted into some apartments, so you might be familiar with that particular property. In relation to parking, I know from experience that the majority of Blythe Street is still historical properties that don't have allocated car parking or driveways, and so the majority of people do already park on the street. So I think that the fact that there is some parking allocated is in fact an improvement on many properties that do exist on Blythe Street, which due to historical reasons don't have any car parking and never have had that. My concern is what you raised, which is in relation to how close it comes to your parents' property, and your flossing argument was well articulated. And I would sort of say to the developer that, if there is some way of trying to address that as you prepare this property, then I'd certainly, I think a lot of people would welcome it, that ongoing discussion. So that's the primary one for me. And I've also taken on board the comments that have been made around a lack of lighting in the laneway, and that's something that as a ward councillor I'll take back and see whether there's a reason that we can't do that. So overall, I think that this is a very reasonable approach to the site, and I'm intending to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Hopper. I'll put Councillor Thompson's motion to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. And I'll now pass to the Planning Officer to outline the process from here.
Council has decided to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit subject to the conditions outlined in the recommendation. Once the notice is issued, a copy will be sent to the applicant and all objectors. Objectors will have 21 days to appeal the decision, and the applicant 60 days to appeal any of the conditions to the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the final application this evening, DED 516 15 BREESE Street, Brunswick, Planning Permit Application MPS 2015-279.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
So this is an application at 15 BREESE Street in Brunswick. The application proposes construction of a 5-storey building containing an office and 11 dwellings and a reduction in the car parking requirement. The application was advertised and 2 objections were received. The site is located within a commercial 1 zone and is affected by 4 overlays: the Development Contributions Plan overlay, the Design and Development overlay, the Parking overlay and an Environmental Audit overlay. And it's also located within the Brunswick Activity Centre. On the screen we have a view of the subject site, the frontage facing BREESE Street and the side facing Duckett Street. There we have a view of the adjoining properties to the north. So the proposal includes on the ground floor an office, bicycle storage area, bin storage area, and car parking for 6 spaces in a car stacker arrangement. Moving up, we have a mezzanine level with storage cages, followed by on the first floor 3 2-bedroom dwellings. This layout is repeated on the 2nd and 3rd floors. And moving up to the 4th floor, we have a 2-bedroom dwelling and a single-bedroom dwelling. On the screen is the front facade facing BREESE Street. We have the south elevation facing Duckett Street. We have the west elevation facing the laneway to the rear, in which vehicle access is obtained. And we also have the north elevation there adjoining the residential property to the immediate north. So over the course of the application, there are a few concerns raised with the appearance of the development. On the left of the screen, we can see what was originally proposed, and on the right of the screen, we can see the revised plans that were submitted late last year and which are referenced in the recommendation as part of Condition 1. Of particular note is the additional windows that have been provided and the changes to the materials and appearance. There we have the BREESE Street facade and the changes with the originally proposed on the left and the revised on the right. So the recommendation in the report recommends a notice of decision to grant a planning permit with the following key conditions outlined. So windows and balconies not to be obscured by the brick facade architectural treatments, so that they're open to the, so that the outlooks are open. Setback to BREESE Street above the street wall height a minimum of 3 metres, so that's for the 4th level. The alterations that are outlined in the revised plans, which form part of the attachments in the report. Minimum of 2 adaptable dwellings, as well as the provision of 18 bicycle spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the gallery who wish to speak in objection to this application? Yes.
Mark Higginbotham isn't here. On behalf of Mark Higginbotham, I'd like to raise the usual issues over car stackers, noise to neighbouring residents, etc., etc. You've heard them before. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please come forward.
G'day, my name's Danny. I was one of the objectors. I live directly across from the proposed dwelling. Just bought my first unit, so this is my first committee meeting, so apologies if my arguments aren't as coherent as some of the other ones that we've had. I guess my big issue is in regards to the size of the construction in the context of that side of BREESE Street. Now, my understanding is that the property next door to it is heritage listed, so that's not going to be built up. Every other dwelling on that side of BREESE Street up to not Duckett, but the one north of that, I'm not sure what it is, everything's 1 story. You go south down to Hope Street, everything's 1 story. So basically what you're going to have is this massive eyesore in the middle of BREESE Street, which, yeah, I do admit there is general apartment buildings broadly around it, but in this one little section of BREESE Street, you're going to have 5 stories, whilst everything surrounding it is 1 story. I'm not sure if there's precedent, if that's usually kosher with council, but it makes no broad sense to me. So, and I guess I just read the council's application document, and on page 140 it says the questions raised: does the proposal respond to the preferred character of the area? And the response is the proposal is generally consistent with clause 22.01, the neighbourhood character clause. And then it simply says council's neighbourhood character local planning policy aims to support substantial change in the Brunswick major activity centre through the creation of new character of increased density. That just seems to conflict with small little terraces that have heritage overlays. So I guess that's my concern.
Thank you.
And I guess my proposal would be just to knock it down a couple of levels. Cheers.
Thank you, then. Are there any further speakers in relation to this application who wish to object? Is there a representative for the applicant present? Thank you.
Good evening, councillors, officers. My name's Andrew Gray, Town Planning Consultant, ARG Planning. Just before I make my submission, I just want to respond to a couple of things in the previous speaker's submission. The properties to the north of our site are not in a heritage overlay. They are also identified within the structure plan to be redeveloped in accordance with the objectives of the structure plan. So there's no planning policy provision or heritage overlay that affects those properties, and our understanding is that they are expected to be developed similarly to other properties within the structure plan area. And also note that the gentleman speaking on that particular site does live in I think a 6-storey apartment building directly opposite our site. So I'd just like to point those things out that there is those points I'd like to put before council. My client's family has owned this site since 1983, so for over 30 years, and they have had the property as a commercial property for that time. And obviously they have watched, as we all have, with the change in that area around BREESE Street, that the area has now become an area with a character that you'd see in the order of 5 to 9-storey buildings that have been redeveloped. This particular site has many advantages. It's a corner site. It's got two streets and a laneway at the back. Gives a lot of advantages to the design response in terms of the layout of the dwellings, in terms of dual aspect. There's no screening to the balconies. There's high quality access to light, ventilation for these units. Very good ESD outcomes. Good views from the dwellings, and there's no screening of any balconies. So we say that this is will provide for a very high quality amenity outcome for residents. It's a boutique development. It's only 5 storeys, 11 dwellings only, and we say that the 5-storey scale for this site is at the lower end of the developments nearby. Opposite, there's up to 9 storeys. Tonight, council supported up to 9 storeys at the Courthouse Hotel site. Duckett Street, I believe, is up to 8 storeys. So in terms of the scale of the area and the character of the area, the 5-storey scale of this building, we say, is appropriate. As Mr Molechner pointed out, we've worked through a range of issues with the officers very constructively, and we say that the outcome of the design at this stage is very good. Undoubtedly, the issue relating to Amendment C134 is something at the front of council's mind. The current DDO 13 allows 18 metres. The proposed DDO talks about 13.5 metres, and we're at 16 metres. And we say that that is not an unreasonable outcome for the reasons set out in the officer's report. I would also say that as part of the officer's recommendation and the discussions we've had, that there's a high voltage power line that needs to be undergrounded in front of the site to allow for the street wall to come out in terms of that, and that is a relatively substantial cost which needs to be factored into the development. So one of the other factors, if the upper level is removed under the to get it down to 13.5 would be a significant feasibility issue in terms of the cost of that undergrounding the power line. We support the officer's report. We have no issue with the conditions therein, and we seek council support. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Thompson.
Question in relation to the power line and power poles.
Yes.
Is that to be done prior to demolition, prior to construction?
It would have to be prior to construction, because the architect got what's called a sag and sway survey for the power lines at the moment, and the original plan set the upper levels back because of that, and so it would have to be done at the stage, I believe, before construction, or at the start of construction.
But not prior to demolition?
Look, I don't know the exact timing, councillor, but it would certainly be done before the construction of the building happened, because there's an issue in terms of safety and a whole range of issues.
That was my biggest concern about the site, just that and the safety.
Yes, yes, okay.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Kavanagh?
You mentioned the comparison with Sydney Road, the courthouse.
Yes.
Okay. The courthouse building's on a land of 1,187 square metres. Yours is 267 square metres. That's on Sydney Road, and we approved it because it had a heritage site. And I don't think the comparison's a fair comparison.
Oh no! Look, I accept that. I think the point I was trying to make was that in terms of the general scale of the area, having a smaller building sitting amongst bigger ones is in my view going to be an interesting.
And do you really reckon it's a fair shot to have a guy, the gentleman who lives at the 6th story, or not, when he's in a?
No. I think the point is that our client is looking to build this development, and there'll be people like the gentleman who will buy those properties and live there and have the opportunity to do that. And it just seems, in my submission, unusual for someone who's benefited from the development that's happened in the area to object to development happening in the area thereafter.
I hear your point, but his point was valid. They are single story currently.
Yes,
on that side of the road.
I accept that, but the strategy does talk about that area, those houses going.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, sir.
So we were just clarifying the points about heritage, which you are correct. There is no heritage overlay for that particular spot. Any further questions from councillors? Is there a motion the councillor wishes to move in relation to this? Yes, Councillor
I'm prepared
Kavanagh.
to move the officer report on page 131, 132, 33, 34, 35, 36.
Is there a seconder for the officer's recommendations as moved by Councillor Kavanagh?
But Councillor Hopper's not here to do any work, so I'll second that.
Not a very fair comment to make, Councillor Thompson. No. Councillor Thompson, second Councillor Kavanagh's motion.
Firstly, can I say, did Dan use it? You might be a novice, but you presented your case extremely well and your points were extremely valid. So please don't think that because I'm moving this, I wasn't impressed with your submission, and I appreciate you coming along. And I know that it's difficult, particularly when you haven't had the experience of planning before, but I'm really pleased that you objected, although I'm voting the other way, and I'm pleased that you had the courage to put up your application, your objection, etc. All right, so, and believe me, sometimes it can be only one or two things that happen to be brought up at the meeting, and it can swing councillors. So please don't take, please continue that. To Nick, I'd like you to represent Mark Higginbotham on every occasion possible in the future. It would be very good. Okay.
How much do you know about public toilets?
You're succinct and clear, and I'm sure Mark's at the Beethoven Festival at the moment, so that's probably why he's not here tonight. All right, so look, I'm supporting this application. I can hear their concerns about it, but I do think on balance this does deserve our support. I think, in many ways, if not to support it would be in many ways to go against what our thrust is for that particular part of our municipality. And so, I can hear the concerns, etc. But really, I think considering it's a corner site, considering it's so closely located to transport, etc., because it's in that vibrant part of Brunswick, I think a 5-storey development is worthy of approval.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Thompson, do you wish to speak?
Just in relation to Daniel's queries on height in that particular zoning, it's sitting between two plans currently. So we've got one that it currently sits under, which would let a developer build up to a certain height, and another recommendation at the moment that's about to be approved that should drop that. And the development here sits right between the two of them. Every one of the sites within BREESE Street and the precinct there, in fact, in the whole of the Sydney Road precinct, which runs all the way along there, we've gone out with a fine-tooth comb and marked every one of those to say this is the height that we would like these to be, and this is what we hope to see developed there. So unfortunately you will see further development along there, and you'll wonder why certain buildings have gone to a certain height and certain ones have not. because officers have gone through and looked at every one of those in consultation with the community to make sure that they understand that we are looking to develop those corridors where our trams and train lines are, because we've been asked to house another 30,000 residents within Moreland over the next coming years, and through consultation with our community they've said let's put them where we can make them move, and where we can make them move is trams and trains and buses, and try and protect some of the residential zones further out and to the north. So that's why we're able to sit here and say that site there, whilst it looks all like single stories to you at the moment, will eventually change as the buildings around you currently are. So
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Hopper?
Thank you. Look, contrary to Councillor Thompson's objections before, I'm not failing to second this because I'm not doing any work. I'm not seconding this because I'm actually voting against it. And my reasons for that have nothing to do with height. I agree that this is probably the right height for this area. My reasons, believe it or not, are to do with parking. And some people might fall down in shock because often I'm fairly, flexible on these things. But last year I requested a council report on the impact of parking in BREESE Street in particular. I'd received many submissions from residents in BREESE Street saying that they had been the subject of accidents with people rat running in BREESE Street and feeling that the parking in that precinct is not sufficient. And to this time I haven't received that report, and so until I have that information I don't feel comfortable approving developments which further impact on parking on BREESE Street. I am not convinced on car stackers, and I know that Nick has got up and acted as Mr Higginbotham, who does come to council meetings and talk about car stackers, and it's something that we often hear at VCAT and at a state level is still sort of very much in a grey zone. And I think that here there's 3 spots with car stackers, which contributes to 6 car parking spaces, but I'm still not convinced that people use those car parking spaces in stackers, and that people won't be looking for street car parking. And so with those things in mind, I'm going to vote against this one.
Thank you, Councillor Hopper. I'll put Councillor Kavanagh's motion to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. I'll now pass to the officer to outline the process from here.
Thank you. So the Urban Planning Committee has decided to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit, subject to the conditions contained within the recommendation. Following the issue of the notice of decision, both the applicant and all objectors will receive a copy. Objectors will have 21 days within which to lodge an appeal at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. In the event that no appeal is lodged, a planning permit will be issued. The applicant will have 60 days from the date of issue of the notice of decision to appeal any conditions of the permit.
Thank you. And thank you for coming tonight and for submitting your objections, and for the applicant for also attending. And I'll declare the Urban Planning Committee closed. Thank you.